2025 was an insane year for weather. From crazy tornado outbreaks to record-shattering hurricanes. There are a lot of events to discuss that happened last year. But to me, there was one month that stood out. January. In the early part of the month, a winter storm overperformed and provided plenty of snow across north-central Georgia. Of course, when it snows down south, expectations are that it's the snowstorm of the season, and no other winter storms would come by. But for the southeastern US, they'd end up being wrong, just like they were in 2014. So wrong, in fact, that records that were thought to be unbreakable would soon end up being shattered. From January 20th through the 22nd, 2025, a historic, record-shattering winter storm and blizzard rocked the southeastern United States. It wasn't in the northern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, or Georgia. No, it was in far southern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, southern Georgia, southern and central South Carolina, and eastern North Carolina. Records that have been in place for over a century in some locations, broken within 24 hours. An event so anomalous that the only other system that comes close in terms of impacts is a winter storm from 1895. Given the historic nature of the storm system, I feel like it's warranted to cover the event. So today, I will be taking a deep dive into the 2025 Gulf Coast blizzard. I'll be covering the synopsis, preparations ahead of the storm, the winter storm and blizzard as it progressed, the aftermath, and the historical legacy this system has. Welcome to Nature's Fury. Alright, so since it's been a hot minute since I've discussed a winter storm, especially one this far south, I want to discuss how winter weather systems work before diving straight into the synopsis. If this sounds very similar to what I did in the Texas Deep Freeze video, that's because it is. Winter weather systems really encompass a bunch of different types of storms into one, with the one common factor being that the air needs to be cold. Generally though, these systems are usually referred to as winter storms, a storm system characterized by a combination of heavy snow, blowing snow, and/or dangerous wind chills. In terms of winter precipitation, there's snow, sleet, and freezing rain. What type of precipitation occurs is related to the temperature in a series of layers in the air that can cause the precipitation to melt or freeze on the way down to the ground. For the area that we're covering today, if they get any sort of winter weather impacts, it's usually wind chills, sleet, or freezing rain. Blizzards are just winter storms, but with higher winds that bring whiteout conditions. Ice storms produce at least 1/4 of an inch of ice onto exposed surfaces, and then there are Arctic blasts, which is the general term given to massive temperature drops behind an Arctic front. For winter precipitation, you need moisture, lift, and cold air. Duh. With all these factors, the best bet for winter precipitation is on the northern side of an area of low pressure. The big issue for the Gulf Coast comes down to that moisture issue. Freezing temperatures in the southern US are usually behind an Arctic front, and more often than not, the atmosphere ends up being too dry for winter precipitation. Now, generally speaking, when the atmosphere is forced upward in a snow system, the temperature in the atmosphere will drop until the air is saturated. You can see this process unfold on radar. In SnowJam 2014, snow seems to be falling much earlier than when reported. That's snow that's melting and moistening up the atmosphere, which also lowers the temperature. However, in our subject area today, that process is harder to pull off as moisture from the Gulf is already there to keep temps at just above freezing, according to Yale Climate Connections. As it turns out, this wouldn't be an issue in this case. Prior to the winter storm's eventual formation, a large blast of Arctic air swept across the nation, sweeping it to the south from the 18th and into the 19th. By the 20th, a large trough in the upper atmosphere was pushing south and east across much of the central United States, stretching from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf Coast. Ahead of this trough, moisture from the Gulf was drawn to the north. Closer to the surface, an area of low pressure formed over the Gulf, reinforcing the northerly moisture flow, and aiding in saturating the cold, dry air that was in place, which would help snow reach the ground instead of all melting in the atmosphere. According to NOAA, this setup resulted in a lake effect-like snowstorm for the Gulf Coast states, and snow-to-liquid ratios ended up being unusually high. Instead of the usual 10-to-1 ratio, it was 15-to-1. The system would move to the east before curving to the northeast as it moved over Florida. It was more complex than that, but that's the basic overview. Essentially, what this whole scenario left us with was that the corridor of wintry precipitation would be from south-central Texas to the coast of the Carolinas. Now, I'd give you specific charts and whatnot outside of the QPF, but those archives are dead for some reason and I can't get them to work. Regardless of the issues with the archives, what I can tell you is that this was well forecasted. The bullseye for this event was pretty much centered on south-central Louisiana, eastward into the Florida Panhandle, with smaller snow chances in the southern part of the Piedmont region in Georgia and to the east and parts of South and North Carolina. So, with a pretty good forecast that I can't delve further into because of archives being down because God hates me, states in the region that would soon be impacted began to prepare. Ahead of the event, the main states that were on standby were Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and North and South Carolina. 2 of these states I want to talk about in detail. Let's start with Texas. For this region of Texas, the last time they saw winter weather of any kind was back in February of 2021. What happened that year? Oh no. The 2021 Texas deep freeze was on the forefront of many people's minds going into this event in the Houston metro. Numerous state agencies were preparing for the storm. Of those, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas was front and center, saying they were making preparations in order to avoid what happened during the 2021 Texas deep freeze from happening again. In reality, what prevented this from being a repeat of what happened in 2021 was that this was in a more localized area instead of the entire state. In Houston, schools announced they would be closing for 2 days. The city mayor told residents to prepare for what he described as a very serious and dangerous weather episode. City crews were already at work treating bridges and roads throughout Houston. However, since all that pre-treatment does is lower the freezing point for precipitation that hits the ground, given how cold it was supposed to get, roads getting slick were inevitable. Residents were discouraged from trickling their faucets in their sinks, as that could severely impact water pressure across the city. In the state of Louisiana, Governor Jeff Landry issued a state of emergency ahead of the storm, and preparations were similar to that of Texas. Crews went out to prepare the roads, and residents were urged to prepare. Warming shelters were open in parishes across the state, with the frigid cold temperatures expected. In Mississippi, Governor Tate Reeves declared a state of emergency. Warming shelters were open in Hancock, Jackson, and Stone counties, alongside others, and residents were urged to stay at home. Mostly the same for Alabama. Governor Kay Ivey declared a state of emergency, and cities on the coast got ready. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency, and the state legislature canceled meetings slated for the 22nd and 23rd. Residents in the region were skeptical at first of the chances of snow occurring, and to be fair, it was understandable.
I remember thinking, we're not going to get snow, we're not going to get any, or if we do, we're going to just get a couple of flurries.
As the storm was first approaching, I was expecting at least 4 or 5 inches of snow, but I did not think there would be that much.
Another resident, Raman Lover near Houma, Louisiana, wasn't expecting much either. There weren't any real expectations she had going into the event, thinking that the Weather Channel was overestimating the potential snow totals or mistaking it for freezing rain. In Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp declared a state of emergency, and preparations began for the state. I also can't find much on what happened in South and North Carolina, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it was similar. However, for one part of the state of Georgia, there were more alarms ringing than one would think. On the afternoon of January 20th, a winter weather advisory was issued for areas in north-central Georgia. Almost immediately, schools started closing in the Atlanta metro, and colleges that were expected to get hit with barely anything closed as well, including the University of North Georgia. Now, you may be wondering why there was such a panic here. Well, it's because the system was eerily similar to a different winter storm that has happened before. If you live in the Atlanta metro, all I need to say is January 28th, 2014, and you should all have wartime flashbacks. The response in North Georgia seemed to be out of nowhere, but given some history, you'd understand why North Georgia responded the way it did. The big question with the system in 2025 was with its northern extent, the cutoff line. Routinely here, the cutoff line for snow is very difficult to pinpoint, but unlike most times where the question was how far south would it go, it was how far north would it go. In the days leading up to the event, models were shifting very subtly to the north of where it was. Those slight shifts would, in turn, shift the location of the snow cutoff line. The big problem for areas in North Georgia and in the Carolinas was that the air was too dry. There would be snow showing up on radar and precipitation throughout the day, but it wouldn't start making it to the ground until the system was nearly out of the state. Of course, that changed to where it would begin snowing and reaching the ground by 2 to 3 p.m., but the forecast was very messy for areas in North Georgia. Does this sound familiar to anyone? If you said that this seems like something similar to what happened in 2014, you would be kind of right. Now, in this case, the event went as it was forecasted. But people don't seem to get how much Snow Jam 2014 impacted how the state responds to winter weather. And given how people drive in the state, it was better to just pull the trigger and close the schools that Tuesday or do early dismissal. Unless you were Cody County, in which case you said screw that. To residents such as Broker, who was keeping a close eye on the models, the idea of a Snow Jam repeat wasn't out of the question when talking with him about the storm. While snow totals wouldn't be anywhere near to what it was during Snow Jam 2014, the end result still was dangerous road conditions, so the proactive response ended up paying off in the end. With preparations in progress or nearing completion, the low-pressure system soon formed and began its journey to make history in the weather realm. Starting after 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on January 20th, the system began producing widespread precipitation in southeastern and south-central Texas, with a winter storm warning going into effect by 6 p.m. Quickly, precipitation started to overspread that part of the state. Come midnight, winter storm warnings in Louisiana quickly went into effect, and heavy snowfall soon started to pile up. In Texas, roads were becoming dangerous, and soon a deadly crash took place near a bridge on Highway 57 in the southwestern part of the state. By 4:20 a.m., NWS Lake Charles saw the conditions deteriorating themselves, and did something that nobody really saw coming. At 4:36 a.m., a blizzard warning was issued for Jefferson and Orange counties in Texas, and Cameron, Calcasieu, Jeff Davis, Acadia, Vermilion, and Lafayette parishes in Louisiana. The furthest south a blizzard warning has ever been issued. Only a few hours would pass before even more impacts were seen in Louisiana. At 7:33 a.m., the Lafayette Regional Airport had canceled all its flights, and come around 8:30, near blizzard conditions were observed in New Orleans. And it would only take a few hours before snow would start falling in Florida and Alabama. Meanwhile, further north, snow was melting in the atmosphere, moistening up the air so that snow could potentially fall later in the afternoon. At 1:15 p.m., NWS Tallahassee put out a statement warning of the life-threatening situation that could unfold in portions of the Panhandle, urging residents to stay off the roads as snow fell in the Panhandle and southern Alabama. By 3:30 p.m. Eastern, snow would soon start making its way down to the ground in parts of central and northern Georgia. Meanwhile, the wintry conditions persisted along the Gulf Coast, soon blasting ashore near Tallahassee by 5 p.m. For the areas hit the hardest by the blizzard, the snow started to wane as the snowy conditions moved northward into south-central Georgia. Those who didn't get snow ended up getting freezing rain and sleet, deteriorating driving conditions for many. The system produced anywhere from 4 to 6 inches of snow as it moved up to the north with snow falling through the Carolinas. By this point, it was on its way out to sea, eventually becoming Storm Aowen. Come the morning of the 22nd, many were in awe at what they had just experienced. The wintry scene began all the way out in south-central Texas near San Antonio. While snowfall amounts in this region weren't anything to write home about, it was still a pleasant surprise. The snow really picked up in eastern Texas near Houston, where a band of 3 to 4 inches of snow fell in the city going towards the northeast. Those in the metro came out to see the snowy scene outside of their homes. One of those was Helix, who you may remember from my Texas Deep Freeze video. He said regarding the whole experience, "It wasn't really a blizzard here in Houston, but the snowfall reminded me of when I used to live in St. Louis. It was legit snow, not that BS ice we usually get down here. Definitely made me feel at home though. I could actually make a snowman with it." Just a little bit south was Altair in League City, Texas, where the wintry weather continued into the morning. In the 23 years they had lived there, they had never seen snow come down as hard as it did or stay for as long as it did. We still had bits of snow on houses and in shaded areas roughly 3 days after the storm came through. It was probably the best storm we could have had, especially considering we kept power and I got the entire week off from class. I'd give anything to have Houston be a winter wonderland again. Kate Dempsey Principe in Houston got a few inches of snow, But the stressful part was trying to explain to our Midwestern parents who were visiting that they didn't have snowplows or salt trucks, and it would indeed be dangerous to drive around even if it was just a few inches of snow. North of Houston in the woodlands was Jason Greer, who feared that they would lose power like they did in the 2021 Texas deep freeze. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and Jason's family was happy to just enjoy the snow once again. The snow amounts got larger as you got closer to the Texas-Louisiana state line. Chibi Jinji and their family stayed in place since they didn't know how to drive in such conditions. The family dogs did seem to enjoy the weather, though. The majority of the snow ended up in south-central Louisiana near Lafayette. Aircraft and more lived in the general area when he suddenly heard a loud bang. As it turns out, it was thunder snow. Yes, thunder snow in Louisiana. My friend Ethan DiMartino was also in the area, and recorded the snow as it came down, getting around 7 inches in total. People in the neighborhood responded like anyone would, getting out and having fun in the snow by sleighing down the road. Trees that weren't covered with snow were instead covered in an insane amount of ice. Nearby was Tyler in Franklin, Louisiana. He had woken up at around 6 a.m. and it was sleeting since 11 p.m. the night prior. Hearing the crackling ice swap to no sound and flurries falling was amazing. His whole family was up by 7 as the snow started to fall harder. It had snowed before in December 2017 for his family, but nothing more than a few inches. The next day, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and only one large pipe had burst in town. During the afternoon the day after the storm came through, Tyler's family made a snowman named Gumbo that had Mardi Gras beads around its neck. The snowman lasted for about 5 days before fully melting. New Orleans was hit with 6 to 8 inches of snow, causing the tropical city to turn into something that was only thought to be seen in something like the day after tomorrow. Lim was close by and told me what it was like experiencing it himself.
When I first went outside, I felt some wind and some light snow approaching, but I did not think it would be that much. As I later went outside, there was over 6 inches of snow, and it was just amazing. I checked with a ruler, I will send a picture of it. There was like around 7 inches of snow. It was just something amazing that I would have never expected to see down here in Louisiana.
North of New Orleans and Hammond was Jerry, who never thought he'd experience something like a blizzard. To him, to witness a historical event and be in a town that received a snowfall total in the deep south so close to the Gulf Coast that it could be seen on the charts, there's a sense of pride involved. He was especially proud of how well the forecast was from the NWS, and how local governments responded. Nothing bad happened in his area to his knowledge. South of New Orleans was ramen lover in Houma, Louisiana. She considers herself weird since she enjoys the snow and the cold, and she wanted to spend every second out there, making snow angels and snow ice cream. Walking through knee-high snow, she loved every second of it. To her, it was the best part of 2025, hands down. Another person south of New Orleans proper was Sol. He'd never actually seen snow in his life before, and there was some concern given how much fell. Nobody was out and about since the neighborhood residents were mostly elderly. Even with all the snow, nobody was out and playing, not even children. Thankfully, pipes at his house didn't burst. The beaches along the Mississippi coast were as white as it could be, and I'm not referring to the sand. I'm referring to the 4 to 10 inches of snow in the area, with Sharkner 1011 being in the Biloxi area. According to him, Biloxi was shut down for almost the entire week because of it. The roads were empty, and it was surreal to see the city covered in snow. Further north near Hattiesburg was Josh, who got up early to experience the whole ordeal.
The coast got a little bit more snow than us in Hattiesburg. We probably got about 4 inches, but it was still really cool to see sheets of snow on the ground. So the day of, I got up early in the morning because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any of it. And the snow actually started a little bit later in the day. It started about noon for us in Hattiesburg. And once the snow started falling, it started as a light dust and then gradually grew to blizzard conditions. The wind started to blow pretty heavily, and it became almost this grayish bluish hue to the air. So I took the opportunity to walk over to my friend Charlie and Charles, and we decided to go to the USM campus and walk around a bit. And it was so cool to see everyone out and having fun together in the snow and really enjoying each other's company. As some of the photos I sent in will show, people made snowmen and they had snowball fights. It was really cool and something I won't forget ever. So after our walk, we came back and I went back to my apartment, and for the days after, it never really got warm enough for the snow to melt. So in areas where there are a lot of shadows, the snow tended to stick and it turned into almost this slush. And it was really interesting to see because the areas where the sun hit, it would melt. But then if you got to an area that was really covered, you had to watch because it could still be slippery. And those conditions lasted for about 4 days, 4 to 5 days after, for all the snow to melt. And it was just a really cool experience.
Further down south in Alabama, far southern Alabama snow totals ranged from 4 to 11.5 inches. Jay Pierogi lived near the coastline, and he couldn't believe his eyes when the snow was falling in front of him.
Boy, was I wrong. We got 10 inches in Gulf Shores. And it was the most snow I've ever seen in my life.
Snow totals in the Florida Panhandle generally range from 4 to 10 inches to the west of Tallahassee, with lower amounts further east and into Jacksonville. The most snow in the state fell in Milton, Florida, where the 24-hour snowfall record was broken, a record that had been set in stone for over a century. JesseLikesWeather was there himself. The snow was sticking from the start, and people were using floaty tubes as snow toys. An unforgettable, once-in-a-lifetime experience he will never take for granted. A possum in a coat was in Panama City at the time. Friends at school joked that he brought the snow back from South Dakota and cursed the state. In Tallahassee, my friend Nora talked about her experiences. She kept opening the door and looking outside, taking photos and videos of the snow as it fell. She went out the next morning and threw snowballs with her husband. Even one of her cats was absolutely fascinated by the snow and even went out to walk in it. Meanwhile, the other cat, Cumulus, despite being named after a cloud, was not interested at all apparently. Also in Tallahassee was Spaceman, and it was their first time seeing snow as a Floridian. FSU was apparently a fun place to be as many started snowboarding downhill on campus using trash can lids. In Georgia, it was the state's most significant winter storm since Snowmageddon 2011 in terms of snowfall totals. For southern Georgia, it was off the charts. A vast majority of the southern part of the state recorded 2 to 6 inches of snow, with a band of snowfall totals ranging from 6 to 9 inches from Decatur County to the northeast. Dre from Albany got around 6 to 8 inches, and power didn't go out. Nobody drove because people didn't know how to drive in so much snow. Icy was in Mitchell County, and it was the first time she saw so much snow all at once in her life. The power lines were hit though, and her family had a power outage that lasted for a few hours. The snow stayed on the ground for about 3 days or so, only to reveal that the snow and the frigid temperatures broke the car window. As for the Atlanta metro, thanks in part to the layer of dry air early on, snowfall totals were minimal north of I-20 and south of I-85. But given it's Atlanta, it didn't mean too much. Devin Scott got about 2 inches of snow, but the freezing temperatures caused roads to freeze fast, leading to multiple accidents. Brokers' wishes that Snow Jam 2014 wouldn't happen again did come true, and thankfully it didn't due to the snow not refreezing after falling. Now, as for me, I had gotten a bit spoiled by the winter storm event that happened on the 9th, and I still haven't seen snow fall as fast as it did during that event. Given that, I was a tad bit disappointed with this winter system. Snow didn't really start coming down in my area until it was around 3:45 p.m., and it stuck almost instantly given how cold it was already. I went back to my office shortly after taking some photos, only to come back out at around 4:30 to see how fast it was sticking and falling. Snow started to lighten up drastically come nightfall, and I would have taken photos if I was smart and hadn't been drinking. The snow stayed around for a day or two, but it quickly went away as soon as Thursday came. Snow totals in South Carolina ranged from 4 to 6 inches, and it was the largest snowstorm for the coastline since 1989. Bethany Oymet in Charleston said she got 6 inches of snow, and she woke up to the entire block having a snowball fight. In her 30 years, she had only seen snow stick twice. In North Carolina, snowfall totals range from 4 to 6 inches in the southeastern part of the state, up to a maximum of 9 inches on the coastline. However, despite the fun that many had in the snow, it's still important to remember that the system did end up being deadly, mainly due to the extreme cold that came in behind it. Highs were below freezing for many areas, with lows being in the teens. The gusty winds bringing the wind chill temps down to the single digits for many areas. The Gulf Coast blizzard was responsible for 13 deaths, cost $200 million in damages, and knocked out power to numerous customers. In Mobile, the roof of the community center that was set to be demolished ended up collapsing. To wrap this all up, let's discuss the historical significance of all this, and what systems this is comparable to. 1 year ago, history was made in the southern United States. What was thought to have been impossible occurred. A blizzard along the Gulf Coast. From January 20th through the 22nd, an area of low pressure in the Gulf in combination with bitter cold air over the US created the perfect storm for a blizzard. Its impacts were wide-reaching, spanning from south-central Texas to the North Carolina coastline, even further beyond into parts of Europe if you count its evolution into Storm Éowyn. The northern Gulf Coast of the United States, known for its tropical and muggy environment, was turned into a winter wonderland for many. Many remember its impacts fondly. However, it's still important to remember the storm did kill people. The deaths, while still present, were limited. Now, this all begs the question, how historically significant is this event? Very, actually. Many storms and winter storms have come really close to doing what this system did. For the area as a whole, the Gulf Coast mainly, there's a handful to my knowledge. The Christmas Eve storm in 2004, a winter storm on December 8th, 2017, and the deep freeze back in 2021. Those were mainly in Louisiana. But if you want to talk about impacts to the northern Gulf Coast as a whole, to find the system that was the most impactful besides what I covered today, you have to go back to the Valentine's Day winter storm of 1895. If records weren't set by the 2025 Gulf Coast blizzard, they were set by that storm. So given we only have 2 recorded instances of something this significant happening along the Gulf Coast, the most we can really say is that it'll be at least more than 1 year before we see something like we did on the Gulf Coast happen again. Realistically, it's a once-in-a-lifetime type event, and I feel like that's what makes this event more special, especially for those closer to the coast. To those along the northern Gulf Coast and portions of Georgia and the Carolinas, the 2025 Gulf Coast blizzard was a once-in-a-lifetime event that nobody in the region could ever forget, and it's an event that I will not forget anytime soon. To start things off credits-wise, there's one massive thanks I have to give, and that is to you all. This video was a community effort, especially when it comes to footage and stories that I used in this video. And if I didn't have those, I wouldn't have even considered covering this. Specifically, I want to thank Aircraft and More, Altair, Bethany Oymet, Black Belt, Broker, Bryson O'Brien, Chibi Genji, Devin Scott, Dre, Ethan DiMartino, Helix, Icy, I'm Lim, Jason Greer, Jerry, JesseLikesWeather, Jonah, Kate Dempsey Principe, Nick, Nora, Spaceman, and Tyler. Without your guys' help, this video would have been impossible to make. Special thanks to my proofreader, that being Foxtrot, Celtic White for being my channel artist, Amberry for the VTuber model, Zinel, Crackleck, and Cyanide Blue for their music whenever I use it, Kai for the footage of the Mississippi tornado I used in the intro, and everyone for watching. It means a lot. Special thanks to those subscribed to the channel Patreon or are a YouTube member. Those being Alan Boomer, Montpelier, Phoenix, and Queen Hyena at the Alfie's Army tier, Autostradamus, Michelle, Tanner, Techno Idioto, and Worm Off the String at the Alf Jr. tier, Bipolar Batty, Brian Hawley, Dante DMC, David R, Esri, Foscrew, Foxtrot, Fry JC, Hannah Stormer, James Sullivan, Kara Kelly, King Shisa, Liz Swaff, Means Beans Machines, Rama, Tirani Rialta, and Van Granny at the Elf Mini tier. And everyone listed on screen at the Elf Supporter tier. It means a lot. For those wondering, there's a lot that I plan on doing for the Patreon and members this year, including member-exclusive content. Interviews are now available for all tiers now, with exclusive seminar-style documentaries on older storms that I normally cannot cover for those at the Elf Mini tier coming at some point soon. If you want to have all benefits and make the most out of supporting me financially, including getting videos ad-free, access to my scripts and notes, and more, consider joining the Patreon. Keep in mind those perks are Patreon exclusive. Everything else should be available for both members and patrons. Supporting me through Patreon and YouTube memberships means a lot to me, and will allow me to keep doing this going into the future. That being said, that's all I got. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider liking the video, commenting your thoughts, subscribing to the channel, hyping it up because that's something I forgot to mention last time, and consider following me on my socials in the description too while you're at it. I'm Alferia, you all have a good one, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all soon.